might be a few parents still joining us, but I know you're all really busy and I'm sure you've got lots of things to be doing this evening. So as I said, thank you so much for joining us. We will be recording this session just for those parents that weren't able to join us this afternoon, so your cameras and mics are turned off. However, there will be a chance to ask questions all the way throughout, so if you do have any questions, we have looked at all of your feedback from the Google form that you filled out and tried to answer those questions that you had throughout the presentation. So hopefully by the end of it your questions will have been answered. However, if there are things that pop up throughout, then please feel free to ask on the chat and either Lucy or myself will answer them. Equally, we'll have a chance right at the end for you to ask any questions that you have. So please feel free to hang on to Zoom at the end if you've still got questions that you'd like to be answered. All that we ask is that you save any questions that are personal to you or your child and maybe not relevant to other people to email directly to Lucy or myself, and we will answer that separately if it doesn't kind of impact the rest of the parents or children. So obviously we have with us Lucy Snowball, who will be the head of Year 5 next year. I'm sure you recognise her from Year 3, some of you who are with us in Year 3. And I am the assistant principal for Year 5 and 6, and I know lots of the children when I taught them in Year 2 as well. So really nice to see some of you that I already recognise. Okay, so the point of this session is to just give you an overview of life in Year 5. Obviously, your children will be moving from Year 4 to Year 5 in September. So just to kind of highlight some of the changes from Year 4 to 5 in terms of timings of day and what the curriculum will look like, and some things for you to be aware of, and to kind of reassure you about your children's transition into Year 5. So just a few key things to highlight first of all. Some of the main differences that you will see moving into Year 5 is the school timings. Obviously previously in Year 4 you'd finish at 2:50, but that does jump up to 3:20 now. We've had a slightly earlier start due to COVID this year, but we're hoping that we can move back to a slightly later start in September, or COVID dependent. But all going well, we will start at 7:40 a.m. and we will finish at 3:20 p.m. In terms of what that looks like for the day, there are a few changes to specialist lessons from what they would have had in Year 4 to what they'll get in Year 5. For example, we have one extra performing arts lesson, so we actually have 2 hours of performing arts in Year 5. We'll have 2 hours of PE the same. We will have one MFL, which will be a rotation, which Lucy will talk about in a little while. They'll still have 4 Arabic and 2 Islamic if they take Islamic lessons as well. Something else that's slightly different is the pick up and drop off. Drop off will be exactly the same, but pick up for Year 5, if you are collecting, obviously they are able to go home by themselves if you wish them to, but the pickup will be at the end of the building by the outdoor learning entrance. Again, at the start of September, when you come back, we'll send out a map and locate those areas for you, but just to kind of be aware that pickup will be slightly different. It'll be the end of the building by the outdoor learning entrance. And the only other thing that is particularly different about Year 4 and 5 is that we have extra time for enrichment built into the curriculum. So that goes from having a 50-minute lesson to having a 2-hour lesson of enrichment. As we have longer in the day, it means that we can kind of spend more time on those things that we find really valuable. So they're the key changes from moving from Year 4 to 5. Obviously, there'll be other things that pop up throughout the session as well. Now, it's a really big move, obviously, especially with COVID and the way that this year has gone, for our students to move from Year 4 to 5. And we want to make sure that when they come back in September, they are confident and ready and feel happy about that transition. So just to kind of reassure you, these are some of the things that we've been doing for our Year 5 transition. Our Year 5 teachers are planning wellbeing lessons for our Year 4 students so that they can familiarise themselves with some of the Year 5 teachers and also help to put their mind at ease at some of the questions or queries or concerns that they might have about Year 5 to ensure we kind of focus on that wellbeing element during transition. As your children probably already started noticing, some of our Year 5 students are going up to teach some lessons in secondary, in the labs, to kind of get them used to moving across to secondary as well. We're really aware that some students have been remote for part of the year or for the whole year, and they might be returning in September after having a really long time out of the academy. We know that this will have a huge impact on them, but we can't wait to have them back at school. So before the end of the year, we'll be doing some virtual tours and videos for our remote students to get them used to the Year 5 corridor, the Year 5 teachers, and help them to settle in as well, although they may not have been here for a while. Equally, from the week of the 27th of June, we'll have transition activities and events happening. They will get a chance to move up to year 5 for a whole morning and spend time with their new teacher and their class, so that they can feel familiar with their kind of classroom corridor and the settings. So when they come back in September, it's not a big change for them and they've already seen it and experienced it. And our head of house are also focusing on transition in our assemblies, again, focusing on some of those questions and queries that they may have before they move up. So we're really confident that our students will feel reassured and happy to join us back in September for year 5. So I'm just going to hand over to Lucy now, who is going to talk through some of the curriculum areas and things that you might also need to know in terms of year 5.
Good afternoon, everyone. Some of you might recognise me. I'm the current head of year 3, and I was last year when many of your children were there. So I'm looking forward to going up to year 5 to see many of those children again and to see you guys as well. So I'm just going to run through some of the curriculum changes or things to expect from year 5 next year. Some might be quite similar to year 4, but there's a few differences as well. So one area that the children got introduced to in year 4 this year is integrated curriculum, where we've organised our learning into, sorry, I think my screen is popping out, I'll do it this way. So integrated curriculum is a different approach to usual. In previous years, we would have taught the subjects individually through a topic, but this time we're going to teach all the subjects through the topic in a different way to make it more meaningful. So rather than say, right, we're going to have an English lesson now or a maths lesson, it'll be taught through a concept or a topic instead. And the whole purpose of that is to make learning more meaningful and for the students to have the time and space to develop a solid understanding of the concepts and ideas involved. So a bit more detail about that. We're going to be doing 3 main topics. So the main topics that we cover in year 5 are space, war and conflict, and natural disasters. So all of our learning will be linked through these topics. Student voice is an integral part of our planning. So we always ask the students what kind of areas or concepts they want to learn about through these topics, and then we'll base our planning around to make it more meaningful for them. We also use our pre-assessment tools and the GL data coming up from year 4 to make sure that all the learning is addressed to the students' needs as well. And we can address misconceptions to make sure that the lessons are taught at the highest impact. Each topic we try and have a final project outcome at the end, which we like to share with parents, as we found that when students have an audience, it adds purpose to the learning as well. But each learning experience is aimed to help prepare students for the future by using real life context that presents real challenges and develop key skills to ensure children are becoming versatile learners. Again, if you have any other questions in more detail, we can answer these at the end. So feel free to put these in the chat as we go along as well. Something that's a bit different but exciting for year 5 student is, rather than just doing French, children actually will be rotating around 3 different languages, 1 per term. So they will have Spanish, German and French. And this is an introduction to the different languages, which will help them specialise their journey as they continue up through the school. I have just added on the head of modern foreign languages email on there if you do have further questions. But just to recap, they'll be learning 1 language per term, and then that can help them focus theirs as they get up into secondary school as well. As always, I'm sure the children are very good at this now, especially after digital and online learning. We do use a variety of apps to support the teaching and learning in year 5. And we use different tools such as Apple Classroom to support the learning and really delve into the curriculum. So if you don't have an iPad already for your student, we do recommend that all students have an iPad and an Apple Pen as well, as that will support them with their learning in school. We know that happiness motivates individual activities, it raises awareness, strengthens creativity and facilitates social relationships. So this is why wellbeing is at the heart of our practice. So not just taught in an individual lesson, but throughout the curriculum, we try and make sure that the students' wellbeing is at the centre of everything that we do. And to support that and to support the teachers, we do have our heads of house and counsellors who are very involved in their students' learning, not just in the lessons, but throughout the day as well. And something that we're hoping to reintroduce next year are the trips. Obviously this year, because of COVID, it's been quite tricky, but we are hoping from next year, if things open up, that we'll be having a few trips. So one of the trips that the children do is Motion Gate, where they get to observe how forces are used in a theme park. And we're also hoping to take the children back to the North Star Residential, where they can enjoy canoeing, snorkeling, raft building, and many more activities as well. So they would have missed out this year. Normally they start in year 4, but hopefully next year they'll be able to get that trip in year 5 as well. So that's just a brief overview of what to expect from next year. In September, we can give a curriculum overview. But yeah, if you do have any questions about the curriculum so far or anything that I've said, please put your questions into the chat.
Thanks so much, Lucy. Some really exciting opportunities for our Year 5 students next year. I know that a few questions had popped up on that Microsoft form, so I'm just going to go through some of the questions or queries that you had beforehand. I know that home learning has kind of been brought up a few times recently. Now, in terms of our home learning, we have our optional home learning menu, similar to as you did in Year 4. Now, the rationale and reasoning behind this is that we have very differing opinions from parents on how much home learning they have, whether we have home learning or not. And research has shown that there's no direct beneficial impact of having home learning for students on their academic progress. However, we really do see the value in learning outside the classroom, and that learning does occur in all aspects of life. And that's something we really want our students to kind of nurture and take with them as they move forward in life. So our optional home learning menu, the optional part is for you as a family to decide how much you want to engage with it. So within our home learning menu, we have opportunities to explore learning within the curriculum academically. So things that link directly to that English, to the maths, to the science that they have done in school or will do in school. However, we also have optional home learning activities that link to real life elements like baking and exploring new languages and discovering new things. And that really gives students the opportunity to explore new interests and see how learning can take place in all aspects of life. And that is something as a school, our philosophy really values. So although it is optional, that's the only optional part there is for you as a family to decide how much you want to engage in it. Our teachers from our end will encourage it and show the emphasis on our home learning menu. They'll celebrate their learning at home in class, and we'll have exhibitions to showcase the learning that they've done. So although it is optional, again, it is for every family to adapt to what they can and what they see the value in as well. So that is the rationale behind our optional home learning menu. In terms of devices, I know Lucy touched on this before, but we do have a Bring Your Own iPad initiative. We encourage students to have an Apple iPad specifically because it works and links up with the software and the programs that we use in school. So make sure that all students can access the same learning at the same time. I know that a lot of questions came around how much screen time they have, but please be reassured that we use a blended approach where it enhances their learning. We only use devices where that's going to enhance their learning and enable them to access things that they couldn't do previously. It's not just to replace the reading and the writing skills that we do previously. We make sure it is a good balance within the classroom as well. And teachers are using Apple Classroom particularly to be able to limit what children access and how long they access it for. So please be assured that we do have that kind of under control from our end. In terms of sports opportunities and clubs, obviously we've been really limited this year in terms of what we are allowed to put on for our students because of COVID. However, we are optimistic that come September, we'll be able to return to some kind of normality. So in terms of things like our sports development programs, our before school clubs and our after school clubs, both from, I know a parent asked about Islamic and Arabic clubs that we do, and also our extracurricular ones as well. They will hopefully be returning in September in some format. So please watch this space in terms of what we'll be offering, and we'll be showcasing and advertising that as soon as we have confirmation from the KHDA. As well as that is the canteen. Obviously that's been off limits this year, but we hope that that will be returning where students are able to go to the canteen and buy their lunch one time a week. Again, it's COVID dependent, so as long as KHDA approves that for September, that's our plan. In terms of classes for next year, We are still confirming enrolment numbers, which will then impact how many classes we have, and impact whether we need to mix the classes or not. Our priority is to not mix children's classes where we can. So if it's possible for us, based on our numbers and the number of classes that we've got, we won't be mixing students. However, it will be unavoidable in some circumstances, but please know that it's our priority, with all the changes going on, to keep as many children together as possible. We will be confirming our classes and our class teachers on the week of the 27th, probably towards the end of that week. So you will be aware of your child's teacher and their class before the end of the year this year. In terms of transition, obviously, you'll be aware that our Year 6 students this year are going to be based in Phase 4. So in preparation kind of for next academic year, where your children will be moving over to Phase 4 as well, we'll make sure that throughout the year there is gradual transition, and again, increasing those lessons like the science labs, and we'll start to use some more of the facilities in secondary to help them be prepared and ready for Year 6 as well. In terms of assessments, we will do the GL assessments next year again. I know that this year they took place in September, but that was just because they missed it in the June of the previous year due to remote learning. So they've just done their GL assessments this year, and they'll take them again in a year's time, and we'll use the data in the same way that we usually do as well, and we'll make sure that the students are prepared for those assessments as always throughout the year. And one final question that we got beforehand was just about remote learning and what that might look like next year. Unfortunately, we're still waiting for guidance from the KHDA. As soon as they confirm what provisions we need to put in place, we'll make sure that that is adhered to. So unfortunately, we can't confirm whether remote learning will still be in place next year or not. As soon as we have that directive, we will pass that on to parents. So hopefully we've covered all of your questions. I can see that some have popped up in the chat now, so I'll start to answer those. If you have all your questions answered, please feel free to drop off the call whenever you want, and Lucy and I will stay around and answer these questions on the chat now. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. If there are questions that you have that are personal to yourself or your child, please feel free to email either of us those questions, and we will get back to you privately. And if you have no other questions, then we will see you in August or September. Thank you so much. I'll just start answering some of these questions that you've got in the chat.